Your heart just did something, and you had no idea it happened. The last time you got into a cold shower, or splashed cold water on your face, or jumped into a lake, in the moment the cold hit your nose and forehead, your heart rate dropped. It slowed down automatically, without any instruction from you, in under 3 seconds. Your blood vessels in your arms and legs tightened. Blood pulled away from your hands and feet and moved toward your chest, your lungs, your brain. Your body did all of this before you had time to think about it. That is not a reaction to discomfort. That is a survival program your cardiovascular system has been running for at least 2 million years. And today, in this video, you are going to understand exactly what it is, why your body runs it every single time cold water touches your face, and what early humans were doing at rivers and lakes that made this reflex essential to their survival. There is a name for what your body just did. Researchers call it the mammalian dive reflex, and it is present in every air-breathing mammal on Earth, from seals to dolphins to humans. The first formal description of it appeared in 1870, when physiologist Paul Burt observed the cardiovascular changes in animals submerged in water. What he was watching was not something unique to diving animals. He was watching an ancient, universal survival mechanism that exists in you. Your face is the trigger. Specifically, the nerve that covers your nose, your forehead, and the skin around your eyes, the trigeminal nerve, the fifth cranial nerve. When cold water contacts those areas, sensory receptors fire. That signal travels to your brainstem in under 3 seconds. And your brainstem responds by doing 2 things simultaneously. It slows your heart through the vagus nerve, and it tightens your blood vessels in the limbs through your sympathetic nervous system. Research documented in the NCBI StatPearls Physiology database confirms this is the primary cellular sequence of the human dive reflex. Trigeminal stimulation, brainstem relay, vagal bradycardia, and peripheral vasoconstriction, all running together. Before we get there, you need to understand what early humans were doing. Homo erectus, the species that preceded us, who walked the Earth roughly 1.8 million years ago, was not a coastal or ocean-going creature, but they lived in a world full of rivers, lakes, and seasonal floodplains. Archaeological and geological records show early Homo populations occupied river valleys across Africa and into Asia, and their survival required regular interaction with cold water, crossing rivers to follow game, entering water to access fish and freshwater shellfish, and bathing in rivers that ran cold from highland sources. Every time an early human entered cold water face first, the same reflex fired. Their heart rate dropped, their blood pulled inward, their body prepared to function without surface air. This was not a learned behavior. It was an automatic cardiovascular response written into the biology of every mammal that had ever needed to survive in or under water. And the key word there is automatic. No thinking required, no training required. The body recognized cold water on the face and began the sequence. The first thing that happens is your heart rate drops, and it drops significantly. Research published in the European Journal of Cardiovascular Medicine measured a mean heart rate decrease to around 57 beats per minute during cold water facial immersion at 10 degrees Celsius compared to normal resting rates. And this is not a gentle slowdown. Studies from 1985 documented that in some individuals, the heart rate fell below 15 beats per minute during cold water face immersion, with one individual's heart measured at 5.6 beats per minute. The colder the water, the stronger the effect. This is the vagus nerve, your primary parasympathetic nerve, applying a controlled brake to your cardiac rhythm. Why would your body slow your heart down when you are in danger? This is the question that makes the dive reflex so counterintuitive. The answer is oxygen conservation. A faster heart consumes more oxygen. In a situation where your next breath is unavailable, whether because you are submerged or because the water around you is consuming your heat so rapidly that breathing is difficult, the priority is not speed. The priority is making the oxygen you have last as long as possible. A slower heart uses less, and that buys your brain and your heart the time they need. The second thing that happens is vasoconstriction. Your blood vessels tighten. Research published in the American Journal of Physiology describes this as peripheral vasoconstriction. The blood vessels in your arms, legs, and skin narrow down, restricting blood flow to those areas. This forces blood toward your core, toward the organs that cannot tolerate a lack of oxygen, your brain and your heart. Your hands go cold, your feet go cold, but your brain stays warm and oxygenated. Your heart keeps beating. The body makes a clear triage decision: protect what cannot be replaced. Your spleen is a blood reservoir. It stores between 200 and 250 milliliters of densely packed red blood cells. When the dive reflex fires, your spleen contracts and pushes those stored cells into your circulation. Published research in the Journal of Applied Physiology confirmed that up to 50% of that stored blood volume is actively expelled into the bloodstream during breath-hold diving. What that does is immediately increase your blood's capacity to carry oxygen, giving your brain and heart more of what they need at exactly the moment when incoming oxygen from breathing is cut off or restricted. This is 3 separate cardiovascular events happening simultaneously. Heart rate drops. Blood vessels tighten. Spleen releases stored oxygen-carrying cells. The physiologist Per Skolander, one of the leading researchers in dive physiology, termed this combined response the master switch of life, the body's ultimate defense against asphyxia. And the trigger for all 3 of these events is cold water on your face, nothing else, just cold water on your face. You can test this yourself. Fill a bowl with cold water, cold enough that it is uncomfortable, not dangerous. Hold your breath. Lower your face into it, nose and forehead first. Within 3 seconds, you will feel your heart rate change. This is the trigeminal nerve activating the brainstem relay. This is the vagus nerve applying the brake. This is the same sequence early humans ran every time they crossed a cold river. Think about what early humans at a river were actually facing. Not a controlled crossing in shallow water. A fast-moving river fed by highland snowmelt. Cold to the point that entering it would trigger a full-body thermal shock. Dangerous, not just because of the current, but because the cold itself could incapacitate them. Research on cold shock response confirms that sudden cold water immersion triggers an involuntary gasping reflex, followed by hyperventilation, followed in some cases by cardiac arrhythmia. The first 30 seconds of cold water immersion are the most dangerous. That is when the body has not yet engaged the parasympathetic diving response fully, and the competing signals from both branches of the autonomic nervous system create what researchers call autonomic conflict. Autonomic conflict is the medical term for what happens when your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems fire at the same time. The sympathetic system wants to speed your heart up because you are in cold water, which is a threat. The parasympathetic system wants to slow your heart down because cold water is on your face, which triggers the dive reflex. Those 2 signals arrive together. The result is cardiovascular instability and, in rare cases, arrhythmia. Research published in Frontiers in Physiology on Arctic condition diving recommends a deliberate adaptation phase before physical exertion in cold water for exactly this reason, to allow the parasympathetic diving response to dominate before the body is under additional load. Early humans who survived repeated cold water crossings were those whose bodies adapted fastest to resolve that conflict. And over generations, this is exactly what the research suggests happened. The clearest evidence we have of this kind of water-adaptive biology comes from 2 living populations, the Bajau Sea nomads of Southeast Asia and the Haenyeo women divers of South Korea. Research published in Cell in 2018 by Melissa Illardo and colleagues at the University of Copenhagen found that the Bajau have spleens approximately 50% larger than those of non-diving neighboring groups, giving them a substantially larger reservoir of oxygenated red blood cells available for release during breath-hold dives. The Bajau did not train for this. The enlarged spleen was present even in Bajau individuals who did not dive themselves. It was a genetic adaptation spread through the population across generations of aquatic survival, and the same research found a second genetic adaptation, more intense peripheral vasoconstriction during breath-hold diving, allowing blood to be redirected to vital organs more efficiently. This is the dive reflex, the same mechanism you ran when you submerged your face in that cold bowl of water, optimized over generations by repeated selection pressure. Your spleen right now contains its stored blood cells. Your trigeminal nerve is ready to fire. Your vagus nerve is connected to your heart. You have the full architecture of the mammalian dive reflex operating in your body, whether you use it or not. Research using simulated diving conditions in laboratory settings confirms this. The reflex fires in untrained humans with the same basic sequence as in trained divers. What differs is not the mechanism, it is the magnitude. The magnitude of the dive reflex can be changed. Research on the cardiac vagal activity of the diving response, a systematic review and meta-analysis published in Psychophysiology in 2023, found that face immersion and total body immersion both produce moderate to large increases in cardiac vagal activity, meaning the parasympathetic brake on the heart gets stronger. And research on experienced divers consistently shows faster and deeper bradycardia compared to novices, suggesting that repeated cold water immersion trains the vagal response over time. This matters for you because the vagus nerve is not just a diving mechanism. The vagus nerve is your body's primary rest and repair pathway. It regulates your heart rate in all contexts. It connects your brainstem to your heart, your lungs, your gut. Heart rate variability, the variation in time between each heartbeat, is one of the most studied markers of autonomic nervous system health and cardiovascular resilience. A more responsive vagus nerve means higher heart rate variability. And cold water face immersion is one of the most direct and well-documented ways to stimulate vagal tone that exists. Research published in Frontiers in Physiology also found that in very cold water conditions, the parasympathetic nervous system response is substantially stronger than in warmer conditions. Cold strengthens the dive reflex. It is not sufficient to splash cool water. The temperature needs to be genuinely cold, the kind that would have been encountered in the rivers of highland Africa or the coastal inlets of early Homo migration routes. You have probably experienced a version of this and not understood what it was. The jolt of getting into a cold shower, the sharp moment of stillness when cold water hits your face in a lake, that is not just discomfort. That is the trigeminal nerve activating a cardiovascular program written 2 million years before you were born. The gasp is the sympathetic shock response. The stillness that follows, the slowing, the centering, is the parasympathetic diving response beginning to dominate. There is also something that happens to your blood that most people never hear about. As cold water triggers peripheral vasoconstriction and blood moves from your limbs toward your core, a secondary effect occurs. The pressure in your chest cavity increases. This hydrostatic shift increases the volume of blood around your heart and lungs. Your heart stroke volume, the amount of blood pushed out per beat, stays relatively stable even as your heart rate drops. The result is a deliberate, managed reduction in cardiac output combined with a redistribution of oxygenated blood to exactly where it is needed. If you want to go further with what we have been covering, the dive reflex, the vagal response, the daily practices that train your prehistoric cardiovascular biology, I put together a 21-day guide that walks through it step by step. It is called Rewire Your Prehistoric Brain, and it is linked below. But right now, let us go deeper into where this all began. Imagine the Omo River Valley in what is now southern Ethiopia, roughly 1.5 million years ago. Homo erectus occupied this landscape. The river provided water, fish, freshwater shellfish, and a crossing route between food sources on opposite banks. Geological and archaeological research suggests early Homo populations returned to the same river sites repeatedly. The stone tool deposits found along ancient lake beds and river valleys indicate prolonged, repeated association with water sources. These were not occasional visits. This was daily life at the water's edge. You are standing at the bank. The river is 40 meters wide. The water is cold, fed from highlands, running fast, carrying sediment. On the far side, the rest of your group has already crossed. You have the tools, the food from this morning's foraging. You need to get across. There is no bridge. There is no shallow ford today. The water is going to reach your chest, and your face will go under when you negotiate the current mid-river. You step in. The cold hits immediately. Your skin receptors fire. Your sympathetic nervous system reacts. Your heart rate spikes for a second. Your breathing wants to catch. This is the cold shock response. The first 30 seconds are the window where the risk is highest. Your body is trying to decide whether this is the cold gasp response or the dive reflex. If you go face first, the trigeminal nerve settles the question immediately. The dive reflex takes over. Your heart rate drops. Your blood pulls inward. Your limbs go cold, but your core stays warm and oxygenated. You are mid-river now. The current pushes against your chest. The water reaches your chin. Your heart is slower than normal. This is not a sensation of panic, it is the opposite. A controlled reduction. Your body conserving. Your brain staying clear. Your spleen has already contracted and pushed its reserve of red blood cells into your circulation. You are carrying more oxygen in your blood right now than you were on the bank. Your body prepared for this before it needed it. This is anticipatory biology. The dive reflex does not wait for you to be drowning before it fires. It fires the moment cold water contacts the trigger zone on your face. The brainstem does not ask whether you intend to stay underwater. It responds to the stimulus. Heart rate drops. Blood vessels narrow. Spleen releases. All of this happens in the first seconds of cold water face contact. By the time you are fully submerged, your cardiovascular system is already in protective configuration. You reach the far bank. You climb out. Your hands are cold. Your arms ache slightly. But your brain is sharp. You know exactly where you are, who is around you, and what needs to happen next. Your cardiovascular system is already beginning to restore normal circulation. Within minutes, your heart rate returns to resting. Within hours, there is no measurable residue of the crossing in your physiology. This was not a trauma. It was a routine event your body was built for. Now think about your body today. You have the same trigeminal nerve, the same vagus nerve, the same spleen, the same brainstem relay, the same cardiovascular architecture as the person who crossed that river 1.5 million years ago. The only difference is that you almost certainly never use this reflex deliberately. You tolerate warm showers because they are comfortable. You avoid cold water because it is unpleasant. And in doing so, you are giving your cardiovascular system a challenge it was built to handle, and then never asking it to handle it. Here is what the research tells us about what happens when you do use it deliberately. Research published in Psychophysiology in 2023, reviewing the diving response and cardiac vagal activity across multiple studies, found moderate to large increases in cardiac vagal activity from both face immersion and total body immersion. Cardiac vagal activity is one of the primary physiological markers of parasympathetic health, of how effectively your body can apply the brake to an elevated stress response. Cold water facial immersion is one of the most efficient triggers for increasing that vagal activity in the short term. There are also documented effects on anxiety. The same 2023 Psychophysiology review noted that cold water face immersion has been found to reduce anxiety and panic symptoms in clinical contexts, including in the treatment of panic disorder, precisely because it activates the diving response and increases cardiac vagal activity. This is not a wellness trend. This is the same mechanism that kept an early human calm enough to cross a cold, fast river without losing their footing. The disclaimer here is important. This content is educational. It is not medical advice. If you have any cardiovascular condition, speak to a physician before deliberately exposing yourself to cold water. The competing signals of cold shock and the dive reflex, what researchers call autonomic conflict, can, in people with underlying heart conditions, trigger arrhythmia. This is not a practice to push into without awareness of your health status. The research on the benefits applies to healthy adults. That said, if you are healthy, this is one of the most studied and well-documented cardiovascular stimuli available to you. Action 1 is the simplest thing you will do today. Fill a bowl or your sink with cold water, as cold as your tap will produce, or with a few ice cubes added. Hold your breath. Lower your forehead and nose into the water for 30 seconds. Do not force it. Just let the trigeminal nerve fire. You will feel the heart rate change. You will feel the drop in arousal that follows the initial shock. This is the vagus nerve activating. This is the dive reflex running its first stage. Your body knows exactly what to do. Do this once per day for 2 weeks. Research on repeated breath-hold diving and the spleen response shows that repeated exposure trains the splenic contraction response, with evidence that active divers maintain higher hematocrit levels for days after their last session. You are not training yourself to dive. You are giving your vagal system a regular stimulus it was designed to receive, that modern indoor life has entirely removed. Action 2 is the cold shower transition. Finish your normal shower with 30 to 60 seconds of cold water. Not ice cold, but uncomfortably cold. Tilt your face directly into the stream. Let the water hit the nose and forehead. This is not about suffering through discomfort. This is about delivering the trigeminal stimulus deliberately. The face must be involved. The reflex does not fire when only the limbs are cold. Research confirms the reflex is not induced when only the limbs are exposed to cold water. The trigger zone is your face. Most people do exactly the opposite. They turn their face away from the cold. They protect their face with their hands. They let the cold hit their back or their legs, and they get none of the cardiovascular benefit because none of the trigeminal trigger zone has been activated. The reflex requires the specific stimulus, cold water on the nose and forehead, not cold water anywhere on the body. Action 3 is the outdoor cold water practice. If you have access to a cold river, lake or sea, even for 5 minutes, this is the most complete version of the stimulus your body was built for. Research from the frontiers in physiology. Arctic diving study noted that the cold per se was the most significant driver of parasympathetic activity over time. Not the depth, not the pressure, but the temperature of the water. And natural cold water, which is consistently colder than your home shower, produces a stronger and more complete dive reflex activation. After 7 days of deliberate cold water face immersion, most people report the same 3 things. A faster recovery from stress, which maps to improved cardiac vagal tone documented in the research. A clearer-headed response during moments of anxiety or overwhelm, consistent with the documented effect of cold water face immersion on the autonomic nervous system in panic disorder contexts. And a noticeable change in how they enter the cold. What was once shocking becomes a familiar signal the body moves into rather than away from. That third change is the one that matters most because it tells you the reflex has become more responsive. The cold shock response, the gasp, the spike, is getting smaller. The parasympathetic dive response is arriving faster. This is the same adaptation pattern seen in experienced cold water divers across multiple studies. Your vagus nerve is gaining tone. Your heart is learning to apply the brake with more precision. What happens when you stop doing it for a week is the other half of the story. The improvements in vagal tone are not permanent without the stimulus. Your body adapts to what it regularly receives. Remove the cold water stimulus, and within days, the enhanced dive reflex response begins to return to baseline. This is not a one-time fix. It is a daily practice, which is exactly what it was for early humans who crossed rivers, gathered food from cold water, and bathed in highland streams every day of their lives. Your cardiovascular system was not built for comfort. It was built for a world where cold water was unavoidable, where rivers had to be crossed, where food was gathered from cold streams, where the body was challenged by thermal variation every day. The dive reflex is not a relic. It is a fully operational system sitting in your nervous system right now, waiting for the stimulus it was built to receive. The trigeminal nerve in your face has not changed. The vagus nerve running to your heart has not changed. The spleen holding its stored red blood cells has not changed. The brainstem relay that connects the stimulus to the cardiovascular response has not changed. What has changed is the stimulus. Your face almost never meets cold water now. The river crossing no longer happens, and so the mechanism waits. Starting today, that changes. Cold water, bowl or shower, nose and forehead into the stream, hold your breath. 30 seconds. You are not doing this because it is uncomfortable and discomfort is supposedly good for you. You are doing it because your trigeminal nerve has been waiting for this stimulus your entire life, and your vagus nerve will respond to it the same way it responded for the person crossing the Homo River 1.5 million years ago. The mechanism is identical. The stimulus is the same. The cardiovascular response is already written. Most people who start this practice say the same thing after the first week. Not that the cold got easier, although it does, but that when stress arrives during the day, their body handles it differently. The spike is shorter, the return to calm is faster. What they are noticing is cardiac vagal tone improving. What they are noticing is the parasympathetic brake getting stronger. What they are noticing is the same thing that early human crossing the river had, a body that knows how to regulate itself under pressure. The result will not arrive in a day. Research on autonomic adaptation to repeated cold water exposure shows gradual improvement. The cold shock response decreasing, the parasympathetic response strengthening. Most people notice a measurable difference in how they feel after stress within 2 to 3 weeks of daily practice. This is not a supplement. It is not a device. It is cold water on your face every morning using the same nerve pathway your ancestors used every time they crossed a river. Everything in this video connects to a bigger picture. 11 things your prehistoric body still needs every day that most people have never been told about. That video is on this channel. It is the one to watch next. If this video landed for you, the next one will go further. Next time, we look at what happens to your liver at exactly 3 a.m. every night. A fasting and fuel switching process Homo erectus depended on to survive until morning, and what modern eating patterns are doing to interrupt it. Your body has been waiting for the cold water. Your trigeminal nerve has been ready your entire life. Your vagus nerve is connected. Your spleen has its reserve. You have the complete cardiovascular architecture of the human dive reflex, running quietly in your body right now, unactivated because the river crossing no longer happens. Give it the stimulus it was built for. Your heart will do the rest. It always has. 2 million years of biology. 1 bowl of cold water. 30 seconds. That is all your trigeminal nerve is asking for. The science of survival, written 2 million years ago, still running in you today.